So I got this 2007 Highlander. It's got the 3mz 6-cylinder, and doing timing belt, water pump, you know, the typical service. And I've done quite a few Toyota timing belt and water pump kits, and I realized probably some people could use a couple tips here. First, couple little notes. When you go do this belt, you'll have all this stuff pulled off. There's your idler pulley. There's your water pump right there. Tensioner's down in the bottom, and the tensioner pulley's down there. So you don't really want to do this job without doing all that stuff. It does not make sense. If that water pump seizes up or any one of these pulleys start making noise, you're either at best case pulling this apart to replace something minimal, or at worst case it chucks the belt off of it and you're in it for an engine. So first things there. So when you strip all this off, this is my new belt, and I was just going to cruise and hammer this out, but I stopped to do this, so not exactly a how-to, sorry for that. But when you go to pull this water pump off, a little pro tip here. The water pump is partially behind a cover back here, that black tin looking stamped steel right where it hits that aluminum. The water pump actually tucks under that a little bit. So service manual calls for pulling out the sprockets, which a lot of times does make sense, because if you're going to do cam seals, you need to pull the sprockets anyway. No big deal. But in this case, this customer's used this thing. It's got a bunch of miles. It's more like he doesn't want to lose an engine. He's not super worried about the details of if it has a little bit of a seep. You can see it's leaking power steering fluid and stuff. So he opted for really just the timing belt kit, not crank seal, not cam seals. So if you're trying to just do the timing belt kit for whatever reason, you can get that water pump out without pulling that black tin part. You can take all the bolts out. You can even turn the front cam sprocket a little bit to get that bolt, and the front cam sprocket a little bit to get that other bolt you can barely see. Get all the bolts out of it. There's a few 10s down there. And then if you pull these studs using a external Torx, I think it was like a let me tell you the size right now in case you don't have one. It's going to be an E8. You can back those studs out, and the water pump will come off with a little TLC. Just be careful with it, and you can pull the pump, gasket, new gasket, pump back on. Next thing, this timing belt is pretty easy hitting this mark here. Let's get you down there. Right there, that mark, not so bad. That mark in the back, I really can't even catch that. That one's very difficult. So it happens all the time where people get one tooth off on this. You can't be any teeth off. If you're one tooth off, you're going to get a crankshaft and camshaft correlation code. You're going to have to redo the job to get the check engine light to turn off. Like, I'm just trying to even get that rear mark, and that's what I'm saying. I really can't. It's tough to see. Okay, so you can see, though, a detail that I want to point out. If you look at that white mark on the belt and that mark on the sprocket, it's actually all I really need to know is right there. That's everything I need. Now, from the angle, it looks like it may not be lined up, but trust me, it's lined up. So that mark on the front of the sprocket to that mark on the belt, that is all I need. So like what I like to do, I'll hang the belt on that rear sprocket, make sure that the white mark on the belt lines up to the mark on the sprocket. It's very difficult to reference to this cover back here. So like this one, you can reference easily. And so I like to hang that rear one, stretch it, get it tight against that idler, pull it to this one. If I have to, I'll grab that sprocket and I'll rotate back, counterclockwise just a bit, make sure I catch it, and then pull a little bit forward. So if this mark, white on the belt, is lined up perfect with that cover, and then over here, if that white on the belt is lined up with the sprocket, they've done you a favor and they've basically calculated what the distance should be, how many teeth from sprocket to sprocket. So if you know this one's in the exact place you need it, with the cover and the belt and the sprocket, everything's perfect. All you really need to know is how many teeth and if it's lined up with the sprocket. That will guarantee you that the actual sprocket's lined up to the rear cover, right? So that mark, that's very difficult. I haven't been able to get it on camera yet. You don't need to really actually verify that. All right, so look, and by the way, that's all explained here in this service bulletin. It's a technical service bulletin, but I find that that's very difficult to understand. So I'm figuring I'll give a little pro tip here because I'm kind of bilingual. I'll speak half engineer and half technician. So remember, this one's got to be perfect. Back one, I'll go in there one more time. Okay, that white mark to that mark on the sprocket. Right there, and you're chilling, been chilling. All right, next thing, down here, there's several marks on the crankshaft, and I'm gonna tell you the right one. So this little point, there's a little dot, and it lines up to that point on the oil pump, actually, on that aluminum housing. That is the mark that I referenced. That's the TDC. Don't worry about that triangle down there. And then the other mark you can reference is on the actual sprocket. You see right there, there's a little dimple. You can use that one to go to the arrows on the belt kit. So again, they've done you a favor and they've put some arrows where that dimple should go. But the important thing is right there is TDC. So if you get all those on and then get all the slack on the right side of this belt, get all the slack on the left side of this belt, get the right side of this belt very tight by working the belt around, and you may rotate the crank a little like this, get all the slack over here, the belt should slip on. When it does, you should be able to put the tensioner in, pull the pin, and you can rotate it 2 revolutions of the crank, and if all these marks are still lined up, you're good. And you don't want to do this job twice, and if you're worried about it, I got the water pump on, I got it torqued, I just put the coolant in. I started burping it. You could actually start it right now with a lot of this stuff off. If you do it the way I've done it with just pulling the power steering pump off the back, not really undoing any of these electrical connectors, it's ready to run. And you can verify it starts and runs good. I don't know that I'd run it for a real long time because you don't have an alternator turning. But it is safe to run. Verify the check engine light's not on and it starts good. Then you could put it together. If you're 1 tooth off, you're going to really regret it. All right, and so I realized I can use this picture too. So you'll notice they're showing you down here. There is I would probably reference this one, right? That's the TDC mark right there. I showed you that. The other one is actually provided by the belt, right? The dimple on the sprocket to the reference mark. Boom, you're good. Then this front one, mark on the sprocket, mark on the belt, needs to come in line with this on the rear cover. And then, like I said, on the back one, mark on the sprocket, mark on the belt. You don't have to worry a lot about up here because that's the help of this belt kit. So this was the Gates kit, but the way I see it being available is import direct through O'Reilly's, and some other people can get this part, but if you can get the import direct right here where it says OE specific, this is the OEM. The OEM belt was a Gates, and so this is the part for this particular vehicle. I'd go ahead and verify it with your parts store, but this kit is the money, and I could prove it to you. I won't run it long, but I'll run it long enough to verify. Okay? So, you can trust me.